Hey everybody, welcome to the Black Sheep Props channel. I'm Steve and I'm here to teach you the tips, tools, techniques, and materials for building your very own super cool EVA foam props. In this episode, I'm going to show you the tools you need to have your very own foam prop building arsenal. I'm going to show you the tools I use the same way that others showed me the tools they use. And listen, this is just the basics. You don't have to use these tools. This will just give you an overall beginning sense of these are the sort of tools you use. Different brands, slightly different versions of that tool. That's all up to you. If you use what I use, that's fine. It works for me. It might work for you. If there's something that you discover along the way that you want to swap out for something, that's totally up to you. It's your show. It's your deal. So if you're ready to hit it, let's take a look at the tools we use for making something. Okay, we're going to start with what to write on your foam with. Very simple. All you need is black and something metallic, because most of the foam you work with is going to be black. So when you're tracing around your templates, when you're going to cut or when you're measuring and marking on black foam, you can use any type of silver marker or any type of metallic paint marker. You can use a silver Sharpie. You can go to the art supply store. All the arts and crafts places carry many different versions of this. You can get fine points, you can get broad points. Silver metallic for when you're working on black foam, and black Sharpie for when you're working on gray foam. Okay, next, cutting utensils. Very simple. I like to use the standard X-Acto knife, the number 11, and this is a super fine point, razor sharp. You use this when you're cutting real detailed corners and you really need to be precise and you want the cuts to be perfect. And when you're going to use an X-Acto knife, you're going to go through blades frequently because EVA foam dulls blades very fast. So you're going to go through a lot of X-Acto blades. So buy yourself a pack of 100 number 11 X-Acto blades. This is the standard classic number 11. So buy yourself a box of 100. It's kind of awkward to keep getting in the box every time you need it, so find yourself a nice little container. Keep them out in the open. That way you have your extra blades and you have your X-Acto. And for bigger cuts, we get a extending box cutter. You can get these anywhere. You can get them at Lowe's, Home Depot. There's several different brands. Nice long blade, and you can use these for long straight cuts. You can use these to tilt the knife and do like nice bevel cuts. And for this, you don't want to have to keep replacing blades, and they do dull fast. Let me tell you, what you can also go out and buy is buy yourself a Kershaw sharpener. You just use it, run it back and forth a few times, and then your blade is good as new, nice and sharp. Eventually, you'll replace it with a new blade, but you'll be able to use it over and over and over again by getting a Kershaw sharpener. So get yourself an X-Acto for fine cuts, get yourself a box cutter and a sharpener for most of your other cuts. Buy yourself a box of X-Acto number 11 blades, and also for disposing of these blades, you do not want to just throw them in the garbage can because someone might jam them into their hand when they pick up a garbage bag. So what you want to do is you want to go to your local drugstore and pick up a medical disposal plastic tub that's for sharp objects. So that way when you finish with a blade, you just drop it in and nobody gets hurt. When you're done, you seal it up and throw it away and everybody's fine. Okay, now glue. Two types of glue. Most of what you use is going to be contact cement for most of what we do. There's several different brands you can buy. I buy Barge just because I learned that from the people I was watching. And to use your Barge, you can use it right out of the can. When you unscrew the lid, there's a little brush on the end. You can use that, that's perfectly fine. But if you're gonna be using a lot of Barge and you're gonna be working a lot with it, it's really convenient to buy one of these glue pots. Or they also call it a cement keeper. Guys who work with leather, like shoe repair and belts and all those sort of craftsmen, use contact cement and they use glue pots. It's very cool. You can just, that way it's hands off. It's got a heavy base. You just pull it out, you get what you need, you use it, you put it back in, and it's cool because what happens is there's no way to seal it, but as you keep rubbing the glue off on the edge, some collects around the top edge, and then when you stick the lid down, it kind of dries like that and makes a seal so that no air gets in. So definitely get yourself some barge contact cement, get yourself a cement keeper, and for smaller pieces, buy yourself some super glue. I like to use Gorilla Glue. You can use whatever brand you like. Get yourself a short ruler for when you're working on a bunch of small things. Buy yourself a long metal ruler for long straight cuts. And the reason you want a metal ruler and not a plastic ruler is because when you are using your knives and you're cutting, you want a metal edge to cut against. That way you can hold it down, and when you carefully cut along the edge, you can get a nice straight cut. And what you can also do, which is super handy, is get a piece of foam and measure out a ruler on your foam. So when you need to wrap your foam around something to measure, that way you've got a foam ruler for that. So metal rulers and a foam ruler. Buy yourself several different diameters of brass tubing, and if you didn't see us use those, what we use these for is you can take an X-Acto knife and you can hold the blade on an angle and you can sharpen the inside of the brass tube, and then you can use the brass tube to stick down on a piece of foam and cut yourself a perfectly round hole you can use as a nail head or a rivet or something like that. So brass tubes help you cut a lot of circles. Always have a dust mask for when you're dremeling and for some of the other things. Also get yourself a respirator. Definitely want a respirator for when you're going to be painting or sealing your props with black Plastidip. And like we just mentioned, the wood burner. That's very toxic. You want to wear something when you're wood burning. It also helps, you can probably hear it, but I always have a fan running in the shop, always next to me, blowing the wind away from me, so that no matter what I'm working on, if I'm using barge contact cement, which you shouldn't be really breathing either, so make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. If you're in a well-ventilated area and you have a fan, you don't have to use anything for contact cement, because if you have the fan blowing, it keeps it from going in your face. Even if you're wood burning, always have a fan on, but it's still good with wood burning and dremeling to wear these, because you do not want to be breathing in the toxic fumes. So for painting, for sealing, for wood burning, you want to get a respirator, and for dremeling and some light wood burning and stuff, you want to get a dust mask. And you also want to invest in a box of disposable rubber gloves. These come in handy for everything. When you're dremeling, you definitely don't want Dremel dust going all over the place, so you wear your gloves when you're dremeling, and you wear your gloves when you're holding a prop and you're painting it. You use your gloves too if you're going to be doing a lot of using your contact cement, and especially when you're using super glue. So dust mask, respirator, and disposable rubber gloves. This is a must. Definitely make yourself a set of sanding sticks. What these are is paint stir sticks with different grits of sandpaper on them. So all you need to do is go to the hardware store, buy yourself 3 different grits of sandpaper, 80, 220, and 320, and get yourself a couple paint stir sticks. And all you need to do is cut strips of the sandpaper, use a spray mount. You can use Super 77 or any other kind of spray mount, and you spray the stick. You stick the piece of paper down. Then after you've cut foam and you've dremeled it and it's kind of rough, and then you go over it with a smoother Dremel and you get it even smoother, then you're going to want to go gradually through your different grits of sandpaper. Very simple. You start with the 80, same thing. You're going to go over that with the 220 and it's going to get even smoother. Then you're going to move to the 320, Then you go over that and it's going to be super smooth. Then you have it really smooth and ready to heat seal with the heat gun. So definitely make yourself a set of sanding sticks. Super handy. The heat gun, you're going to use this for everything. You're going to use this to seal every single prop you make. So after you've done dremeling and sanding sticks to get it to a certain level of being smooth, then you go over it with a heat gun and that causes it to really tighten up and be smooth. And before you paint a prop, you're going to want to heat seal the whole thing so that the foam is tight and you're ready to receive paint. You can also use the heat gun for some really nice detailing. You can use an X-Acto knife to make little creases in your foam or little design details in your foam, and you almost can't see it on the foam because it's a razor sharp cut, but then when you use the heat gun to go over it, those details will come out. So buy yourself a heat gun for detailing, for sealing foam, and when you're going to be bending pieces of foam, like if you're building a helmet or you're building shoulder pads or you're building anything that's round, if you're doing the barrel of a blaster or something, you need to bend the foam. You can heat your foam up and it becomes very soft, and you can roll it up and hold it for a few minutes and it cools and it's bent in that shape. So cannot build props without a heat gun. They're awesome, but be careful because these things are skin peelers. Trust me, I wasn't paying attention. I had it sitting up like this and I reached around it to grab something and psst, and it wasn't fun. So be careful, but you got to get one. They're awesome. Right. Okay, next, the Dremel. The Dremel comes with several different bits. You have super rough bits when you want to tear off a lot of foam, like when we did the axe handle, and then you can move to smoother bits to smooth over even a level further. And the Dremel is absolutely necessary for every prop you'll make. You will use the Dremel to round off edges. You can use the Dremel bits to make rivet details, but you are going to sand everything. You're going to Dremel everything like crazy. So the Dremel is an absolute must. You definitely get yourself a wood burner. You can use this for doing a lot of nice details on your foam. You can draw lines on your foam and then engrave nice details using a wood burner. You can use this for poking consistent holes, like when you're doing the exhaust holes on a barrel of a blaster, or when you're doing wood grain, or when you want to draw in some technical lines on a part and you want to engrave it to create an embossed line in a certain pattern. Get yourself a wood burner. But just like the heat gun, be careful because this is another skin burner. Be careful because they are hot. Brushes, simple. Your cutting mat will get full of dust, full of paper shreds, full of foam scraps. If you're working on a prop for any length of time, next thing you know, you're going to be in a pile of rubble, foam building rubble. So you're going to want to have a foxtail brush to keep your workspace clean. You definitely want to keep your workspace clean. Set a garbage can right next to the table and just regularly sweep everything into the garbage can to keep your workspace clean. Definitely get yourself some circle templates. You are going to repeatedly need circles of all different sizes for knobs, for screw heads, for different sized rivets, for vents, for constant things on your foam props. So you can't beat getting yourself a couple super cheap plastic circle templates. You can get these from any arts and crafts store or any art supply store. Get yourself a pad of Bristol. And what Bristol is it's a white paper, but it's thicker than regular paper. It's kind of like cardstock, and it is excellent for cutting out templates. When you draw your templates and you draw them on Bristol, when you lay it down to trace around it, it's a lot stiffer and it doesn't bend and flop all around like regular paper will. So get yourself some Bristol for when you make templates and you're transferring your lines onto your foam. They're sturdy, they give you a lot cleaner line. And you can also use Bristol for cutting off small pieces of paper if you're gonna do some gluing and you don't wanna get your table all gunky and funky with contact cement. So you buy a pad of Bristol, you can use it for templates, you can use small pieces for contact cementing, you can hold your foam down on it and contact cement over it, and then you can toss it out. And you can also use a small piece of Bristol if you're going to be painting small areas and you don't want to waste a big piece of cardboard. Cut a small piece of Bristol, put a dab of paint on, use your brush, simple little palette you can use a small piece of Bristol for. So Bristol's good for templates, it's good for gluing, it's good for painting, and you can never have enough Bristol. So, Plastidip. Absolute necessity. This is what I use to seal my props before I paint them. What it is it's a spray plastic, just like the name implies. It's kind of like rubber. You can get it in black, white, I think they even have clear, and maybe even a couple other colors. So after you've sanded a prop and you've heat sealed it with your heat gun and you've smoothed it over real nice, after the heat sealing and the foam tightens up, it's ready for sealing so you can paint. So you take the Plastidip, it's a spray can, and you just use it to coat your prop, and it dries pretty fast. You can do as many coats as you want, and that way it gives it a nice, almost a rubber looking coat over your prop, and then you're ready to paint. Acrylic paint. Get any kind of acrylic paint you like from the arts and crafts store. Try out a couple different paints, find the one you like. I get this brand from my local Michaels. I started off with it and it's been fine, so I just stuck with it. Brushes. I like to use the foam brushes for most of my painting. Very simple, very cheap. You can get them at any art supply store. I also bought these at Michaels. You just put some paint down, you dab it, and then you literally tap it all over your prop. So I use round foam brushes. I also have a few different regular brushes for myself, a little bit bigger and a little bit smaller. So when you want to get into a little bit of a corner somewhere that your sponge brush doesn't reach, or underneath a part after you've assembled it and you got to reach in to get to it, you can use a brush for that. And it's also good to get yourself a little chip brush, a small little paint brush, and cut the bristles off really low so that the bristles are really stiff, and you can use that for when you're putting on weathered, scraped off metal detail, so it looks like that's scratches in paint when you've painted over something metal, like when you're doing a blaster or some kind of a weapon that's supposed to look like it's made out of steel and then it's been painted over and some of the paint is chipped off. Make yourself a nice brush for putting on the dry brush scratches. And that's really all I use. I use sponge brushes, I use paint brushes, and I use a cut off little chip brush for my scratched metal look. This is for when you have a long prop and you need to put a piece of metal through the prop and for stability so the prop doesn't wobble. You're going to end up going to the hardware store a lot and buying long pieces of thin brass tubing or thin gauge steel tubing or wire. And what you're going to want is you're going to want a couple cutters. You're going to want a small one for little cuts, and you're going to obviously want a bigger one for when you need to cut something that's got a little more density to it. So you may not use this a lot depending if you're making long props that need support, but it is always good to have yourself a couple different sized cutters. So that concludes this episode. EVA Foam prop making tools. Hope you liked it. If you did, give us a like or share it with a friend. Better yet, subscribe to this channel. That way we can go step by step together through a bunch of super cool builds. So you get the props you deserve. See you next time.